Hey guys, the Chief Asch here again for another OctoberQuest review, and all month it's been leading up to this movie, I guess. It's, or one would think, but quite frankly, it's leading up to my October 31st review, which I will, if it hasn't become apparent yet, well, I guess it could be one or two movies. So when we get there, I'll point it out at the end of the movie, or end of review if you haven't figured it out yet, but anyway. Today I will be talking about the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie that was ever made, way back when, directed by Wes Craven, Robert Englund's appearance, Johnny Depp, Heather Langenkamp, the original movie, which okay. So I'll just get into it. I'll just go, guys. All right. So the original movie. It's interesting. Some of the sequels have definitely been dated, and this movie was, in certain aspects, dated by its predecessors. Of course, the Freddy makeup obviously got fine-tuned and perfected throughout the series. In the first one, you get a much darker Freddy. He doesn't really make jokes. He smiles a lot, but he doesn't really make jokes. He's straight up horror, right? And one of the biggest charms, one of the biggest things, this movie is the original movie. This is the first one. This was the experiment. This was just a passion project that turned into something huge, and Freddy Krueger became a household name. And when this movie came out, no one knew who he was, and that's really awesome to look back on and be able to realize that they couldn't even afford stripes on his sweater sleeves. Right? They just had stripes. Couldn't afford it. So, yes, the movie is crazy. The way, if you look into how they filmed the movie, it's crazy. Some of the smallest things that you take for granted in movies nowadays, a lot of your CGI, they did some really crazy practical effects throughout the series in this series. But the first movie has by far the most crazy practical effects of any of the movies, and they had to think of all these different ways to be able to pull him out and to bring him to life, and it's nuts. The part at the very beginning of the movie where Tina is it shows her like fall to the ceiling, and then she's like getting dragged around. They've made they made that room. They made it in this big, like, rotating stand almost that held up the entire room, and when you see her like being dragged around on the ceiling by nothing, they're literally flipping that room upside down and moving her, and they have a camera mounted that stays on like our vision, and that's how they recorded that. Just they went that far. They started the whole rubber wall thing where you could push through this wall, and your features like slowly kind of creep out of the wall. Or it's used a few times when Freddy's like looking over Nancy in her bed and stuff like that. Probably one of the most iconic horror scenes since horror movies began is Freddy's coming out, kind of pushing through the wall, looking at Nancy, and then just kind of receding. It started off atmospheric horror, really. Not started off. That's a harsh word. Started it in slasher films. And yeah, the movie was revolutionary in that way. And then your slasher, it wasn't your slasher isn't this guy who could just walk into your house and kill you. He's this dude that he fucks with you, and you can't do anything to stop him, right? Like Michael Myers, shoot him and whatever, and he'll fall down and he'll back up and he gets stunned. But Freddy Krueger doesn't. Whatever you do, he just gets back up and he comes at you, and then you just wake up and it's like nothing's there. No one can believe you. With Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, Michael Myers, there's always tangible evidence, right? Even if you go into like the Hellraiser stuff, there's always something that is like, yeah, okay, something fucked up's going on. Even in Candyman, right? They're like, oh, there's all of this evidence and stuff like that. It must be this guy. It must be this guy. But in Nightmare on Elm Street, there's nothing tangible about his haunting a person, his inner deepness, like how he goes about it. And I guess that's one of the big things that fascinates me. Most, not all, but And there's actually a website, there used to be, and there's a website where you can go and you can see all the deaths, like from, there's a few movies that you can do this, and it wasn't the same website, but it has the same idea. And in this Nightmare on Elm Street one, I cannot remember, it might be Coroner Report, Springwood.com or something like that. You can probably Google it, and if it still exists, you need to check it out. But it's a coroner reports of all the deaths related to Freddy Krueger, and it explains how, essentially how all of them look like suicide. Most of them, there's a lot. Then some, because obviously Tina in the first movie, as I mentioned her earlier, hers obviously wasn't considered suicide, but all of the other deaths in that movie are considered suicide, except Glenn's at the end. So I'm giving spoilers on this because you should have seen this movie by now. And as much as I've been talking about all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, how dare you not have watched the first one by now? But anyway, yeah. So it's cool like that. And also, watching it for the millionth and a half time just before watching or doing this review, I realized some of the continuity in it's really, really hardcore, and you can actually see. I appreciate it watching them backwards. This is probably the first time I actually went and watched them backwards in the way I did it. But it made me appreciate number 2 even a little bit more, because when you watch them in order, and he's like, in number 2, he's like, oh, this girl went crazy watching her boyfriend get killed, blah, 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 blah. Watching number 1, all of those plot points they bring up in the second one are in the first movie. They're just kind of side mentioned, and it's very often brought up that Nancy's going crazy. And at the end of the movie, and it shows this little dream-esque thing and you don't know whether or not it happened. If you really pay attention to when they mention Nancy's crazy, it is a huge plot situation that just isn't that apparent. So there's even that extra layer of plot that, like, I haven't really even noticed until, this time around. And it's really impressive how Wes Craven was able to get into that and, think about it and translate it the way he did. It kind of sucks that over time, the idea got a little far stretched and a little expanded and a little, a little too much. But it's crazy, and these movies really hit me really hard because of what is brought by the first movie and the smaller aspects of the other movies. A huge, crazy, awesome thing about this is, and even though it's not necessarily current, a lot of the facts that are said in this movie about sleep studies and dreams and stuff like that, that's what they believed when this movie came out, and that was actual, like, scientific theory. Like, that is what was in belief, that was in practice. All of that was actually a thing at that point in time. Some things have changed when it comes to, like, sleep theory and dream theory and all that. Some of the science has changed, technology has changed, and that's it. But if you actually look into it, everything he brings up is something that people thought. The whole thing that you could, if you die in your sleep, you die in real life. That was a theory. Your brain would, like, shut down because of the essentially the horror. You're, like, scared to death. Essentially, that was a theory back then, and it may still be now. But I think it's been outdated and misproven and blah 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 blah. But it's really awesome to think that this much research and this much passion, this much know-how went into making this movie, and the result obviously spawned 7 sequels and a remake. But the out of all of the slasher movies, in my opinion, I mean, my symbol is the claw and all that, and when it comes to this, this franchise, slashers, horror movies, the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie just really, it's its own entity, and it has such an expansive universe. The movies don't repeat very much compared to other franchises because there's so much to play off of from just this one movie, this one idea. And Robert Englund, he's the only one that was able to embody the character and convey the character in such a way that he's able to last, people now, even when talking about making another Nightmare on Elm Street movie or a remake or something like that, they fight for Robert Englund to be him. And, Jackie Earle Haley had his chance. But anyway, Robert Englund, and when I remember hearing that he was retiring, he's retiring the glove and blah 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 blah. I tried to go and go to that horror fest thing in there was one in Texas where he was doing his last, time in makeup, and I wasn't able to make it. But it's crazy to think that he rode that so long, 30 something years. He held on to that, that role, that title, and it's amazing that it was able to put his career in such a way that he's a super famous actor from this one role. He's done other things, he's been very good in them, but this is his, bread and butter. This is what he's known for, and there's a good reason for it. So if you haven't seen it, which shame on you if you haven't, but you need to check it out if you haven't. It's old, it's easy to access. So all month I've obviously been doing these movies, and I have an absolute utter hate for the remake. Just so much in whatever. So what I'm going to do is on the 31st, these next, on Monday, I will be reviewing the remake of this movie, and it's, I don't really even want to watch it again, but I'm about to, and pray for me. But anyway, so this has been the Chief Asch on the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie ever, and I hope that you tune in on the 31st to see me just talk about that other one. So yes, Nightmare on Elm Street 1, Chief Asch, OctoberQuest review number 29. Isn't that crazy? Wow. Anyway, keep watching.